The badge sat on the windowsill where he'd left it 3 winters ago, catching what little light the December sky allowed. Elias Cole hadn't pinned it to his chest in all that time, but he hadn't put it away either. Some mornings he'd stand at the window with his coffee going cold in his hand and look at it the way a man looks at a scar, not with regret exactly, but with the particular exhaustion of someone who has stopped asking why outside. The Colorado high country was doing what it always did in December, trying to kill everything that wasn't ready for it. The snow had come in the night, quiet and indifferent, and by morning it had buried the fence post to their second rail and turned the trail into Caldwell's Creek into something that looked more like a suggestion than a road. Elias had been up since before the dark lifted. He'd fed the horses, broken the ice on the water trough with the back of an axe, and split enough wood to last 3 days. He worked without hurry and without waste. The way a man works when there's no one watching, and no one waiting. He was carrying the last armload of wood to the porch. When he saw the shape in the road, at first he thought it was a dog. The figure was small and hunched against the wind, moving with the uncertain gait of something that had been moving for a long time and was no longer sure why. But dogs didn't wear coats, even coats 3 sizes too large, dragging in the snow, sleeves hanging past where hands should be. Elias set the wood down on the porch steps without a sound and watched. The shape stopped, looked up, and Elias saw the face of a boy, 7, maybe 8 years old, with dark eyes that had no business being that tired. The boy was holding a piece of bread against his chest with both arms. The way you'd hold something irreplaceable. Elias came down off the porch. He didn't ask questions. There wasn't much point. The boy spoke no English, or if he did, the cold had taken it from him. Elias brought him inside, sat him near the stove, and pulled off the soaked boots to find feet that were white at the toes and trembling. He worked on them with his hands, slow and steady, the way he'd learned to work frostbite out of a calf's ears. The boy watched him with those old eyes and didn't make a sound. Elias heated water, found a pair of wool socks that swallowed the boy's feet to the knee, cut the bread the boy was still clutching, stale, 2 days old at least, and set it on the table beside a bowl of beans left from the night before. The boy looked at the food and then looked at Elias, waiting for something. Permission, maybe. Or a price.
"Go ahead,"
Elias said. The boy ate. Not fast, carefully, like someone who had learned that food could be taken back. Elias sat across the table and drank his cold coffee and didn't stare. Outside, the wind found the gap under the door and pushed cold air across the floorboards. The stove ticked. The boy finished the beans and held the bowl in both hands, as if the warmth of it was the point. His name, it turned out, was Miguel. He said it when Elias pointed to his own chest and said Elias. The boy understood that much, at least. He pointed back, Miguel. Then he looked at the window, and something moved across his face that Elias recognized without being able to name. Elias had seen that look before. He'd seen it in the mirror 3 years ago, the morning after. He didn't reach into his pocket, but his hand moved toward it, stopped just short of the shape of the ring he kept there, and then he stood and went to put more wood on the fire. She came before noon. Elias heard the horse before he saw her. A sound too deliberate for the weather. Someone who knew how to move through snow without fighting it. He was at the window when she came into the yard. A woman on a dark mare, straight back despite the cold, a wool rebozo pulled tight across her shoulders. She dismounted without hesitation and tied the horse to the post, with the efficiency of someone who didn't intend to stay long. When he opened the door, she was already on the porch. She was perhaps 30, with the kind of face that had been pretty once and was now something better, defined by weather and decision and the particular dignity of a woman who has stopped waiting to be treated fairly and started simply expecting it. Her eyes went past Elias immediately, found Miguel by the stove, and something in her shoulders released, just slightly, just enough to show what the last few hours had cost her.
Miguel.
Her voice was low and even. The boy slid off the chair and crossed the room and pressed himself against her side. She put one hand on his head without looking down. Her eyes came back to Elias.
Thank you. I will take him now,
she said. Her English was careful and precise, each word placed like a foot on uncertain ground.
He was on the road. Feet were going white.
Elias said.
I know. He ran. He does that when he's frightened.
Elias stepped back from the door.
Come in out of the cold. Both of you.
She hesitated. Not from fear, he thought, but from the calculation of a woman who had learned that accepting help always came with a cost she'd have to pay later. Then she came inside, and Elias closed the door against the wind. Her name was Rosario Vega. Her husband, Tomas, had died 14 months ago, a fever that came fast and left nothing to argue with. He'd left her a small parcel of land 3 miles east of town, a deed signed and witnessed and filed in the county records, and a son who had his father's eyes and his mother's stubbornness. She'd worked the land through the spring and summer and into the fall, and she'd been doing fine. Her word, fine, said in a way that meant something harder than fine, until Harlan Briggs decided he wanted it. Briggs owned most of the good grazing land between Caldwell's Creek and the Ridge. He was not a violent man by preference. He was a man who employed violence the way he employed everything else, efficiently, at a distance, with paperwork to follow. He'd sent men to Rosario's property twice. The first time, they'd told her the deed was disputed. The second time, they'd told her she had 2 weeks to vacate. She'd gone to the sheriff's office. Dale Pruitt had listened with his boots on his desk and told her that land disputes were civil matters, and she ought to get herself a lawyer. There were no lawyers in Caldwell's Creek who would take her case. Elias listened to all of this without interrupting. He stood near the stove with his arms crossed and his face still, and when she finished, he was quiet for a moment.
Pruitt won't move on Briggs,
he said. It wasn't a question.
Pruitt has dinner at Briggs's house every Sunday,
Rosario said. Elias looked at the window. The snow was still coming down, slower now, the kind of snow that intended to stay.
I'm not the sheriff anymore. Haven't been for 3 years.
I know what you are. I didn't come here for help. I came for my son,
Rosario said. She stood and gathered Miguel's coat from the chair where Elias had hung it to dry. She dressed Miguel with quick, practiced hands. The boy submitted without complaint, watching Elias over his mother's shoulder with those dark, measuring eyes. At the door, Rosario paused. She didn't turn around.
His name was Tomas, my husband. He believed this country was worth believing in. He was wrong about many things.
Then she was gone, and the cold came back in through the door before Elias could close it. He stood in the middle of the room for a long time. His hand found his pocket. His fingers closed around the ring, the small, plain band of gold that had belonged to a woman named Clara, who had died on a night very much like this one, in a house very much like this one, while he was 20 miles away doing what a marshal had told him to do. He didn't take it out. He just held it through the fabric of his pocket, the way you hold something that can't be fixed. He told himself it wasn't his problem for 3 days. He was good at that, at building the argument, stacking the reasons like firewood, making sure the structure was solid enough to last. He had no jurisdiction. He had no authority. He had no stake in what happened to a piece of land east of town or the woman who worked it. Pruitt was the law in Caldwell's Creek, such as it was. And if Pruitt chose to look the other way, that was Pruitt's conscience to carry. Elias had enough of his own. But on the fourth day he rode into town for supplies, and he saw the men. There were 4 of them, tied up outside the saloon in the middle of the afternoon. Not drinking, just present, the way men are present when they're being paid to be seen. They wore their guns low and their expressions lower, and the townspeople moved around them the way water moves around stones, without acknowledgement, without eye contact, with the particular practiced blindness of people who have decided that what they don't see can't require anything of them. Elias bought his flour and his salt and his coffee. He was loading the saddlebags when he heard it. The sound came from the direction of the general store. A voice raised, then a smaller sound, then silence. He turned. Rosario was on the boardwalk in front of the store, and one of Briggs's men had her by the arm. Not violently, carefully, the way you handle something you intend to break later and don't want to damage prematurely. He was speaking to her in a low voice, smiling, and the smile was the worst part. Miguel stood behind his mother with his back against the store wall, holding her skirt in both fists. The people on the street kept walking. A woman with a basket crossed to the other side without breaking stride. 2 men outside the barber shop turned to look at the window display. The Reverend, Elias knew him, had known him for years, came out of the post office, saw what was happening, and went back inside. Elias stood with his hand on his saddlebag and watched all of this. Then the man said something that made Rosario go very still, and he reached out and put his hand on Miguel's shoulder, and the boy flinched, a full-body flinch, the kind that comes from memory. And something in Elias's chest that had been very carefully locked for 3 years made a sound like a hinge giving way. He crossed the street. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for the gun at his hip. He simply walked up to the man and stood close enough that the man had to look up at him, and he said quietly,
Take your hand off the boy.
The man smiled.
This ain't your business, old man.
Take your hand off the boy.
What happened next was brief and not clean. The man swung first. Elias had expected that, had positioned himself for it, and Elias took the blow across the jaw and used the momentum to put the man down on the boardwalk with a sound that brought the other 3 off their horses. Elias stood over the man on the ground and looked at the 3 coming toward him and didn't move. They stopped, not because of the gun, because of something in his face. The particular stillness of a man who has already decided how far he's willing to go and found the answer doesn't frighten him.
Tell Briggs that the next conversation happens with me.
Elias said. He picked up his saddlebags. He didn't look at Rosario. He mounted and rode out of town, and he didn't touch his jaw until he was past the tree line, where no one could see him wince. The message from Briggs came that evening, delivered by a boy of 12 who looked like he'd been paid more than he was comfortable with. It was written in a clean hand on good paper, which told Elias everything he needed to know about the man who'd sent it. Mr. Cole, I understand you've taken an interest in a matter that doesn't concern you. I'd encourage you to reconsider. Men without badges have a way of meeting with accidents in this country. I mean no disrespect. I simply find it useful to be clear. Elias read it twice. Then he folded it and put it in the stove and watched it burn. He sat in the chair by the fire for a long time that night, not sleeping, not quite thinking, existing in that particular state of a man who has made a decision without yet admitting it to himself. The badge on the windowsill caught the firelight. He didn't look at it, but he didn't put it away. They came for the ranch on a Thursday, in the deep of the night, when the cold was at its worst, and the sky was the particular black that comes just before the moon rises. Elias was 3 miles away when he saw the glow. He'd been checking on a horse with a bad shoe, a thin excuse, he knew, for riding past Rosario's property at that hour, But he'd been doing it for 4 nights running and hadn't let himself examine why. The glow was orange against the black ridge, and he knew what it was before he knew what it meant. And he was riding hard before the thought finished forming. He smelled it before he saw it clearly. Wood smoke and something sharper underneath. The particular smell of a fire that was set, not accidental. The house was going fast, the dry timber catching with a hunger that made the night bright and terrible. He came off the horse at a run and went toward the heat and heard Rosario before he saw her. A sound not quite a scream, more controlled than that, the sound of a woman calling her son's name with everything she had left. She was on the ground near the well, her arm at a wrong angle, her face lit orange by the fire. She'd gotten out. Miguel had not. Elias didn't stop. He went past her toward the burning house, and she grabbed his arm with her good hand, and he felt the strength in her grip. Not stopping him, just present, just there. And then he was through the door and into the smoke. The heat was a wall. He dropped low, where the air was thinner and slightly cooler, and moved through the main room by memory. He'd been inside twice, had mapped it without meaning to, the way a man maps spaces he might need to move through in the dark. The bedroom door, the back room, the cellar hatch. He found Miguel in the barn. The boy had gone out the back window, smart, instinctive, the kind of thinking that came from a child who had already learned that adults couldn't always be counted on to save you. He was in the far corner of the barn, pressed between 2 bales of hay, holding a small wooden horse against his chest with both arms. The same posture as the bread on the road, the same eyes. Elias crossed the barn and crouched down in front of him. Miguel looked at him. The fire outside painted the barn walls in moving orange light, and in that light the boy's face was very young and very old at the same time, and Elias felt something move through him that he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not grief exactly, but grief's twin, the unbearable tenderness of caring whether someone lives. He held out his arms. Miguel came to him without hesitation, and Elias lifted him and held him against his chest and stood there in the burning dark, and something broke open in him that he had spent 3 years keeping sealed. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a movement. It was something interior, something structural. The way a dam doesn't fail all at once, but gives way in one place, and then the water finds the rest. He was crying. He hadn't known he was going to, and he couldn't have stopped it, and he didn't try. He cried for Clara. He cried for the daughter who had lived for 4 hours and been given a name. And then been taken back by something that didn't care about names. He cried for the night he'd been 20 miles away following orders, and for every morning since when he'd woken up, and the first thing he felt was the specific weight of having arrived too late. Miguel didn't move. He just held on, his small hands gripping the back of Elias's coat, the wooden horse pressed between them. After a while, Elias became aware of something on the ground near his knee. He looked down. The ring had fallen from his pocket, had worked loose in the running, in the crouching, in the holding, and lay in the straw, catching the orange light from outside. Miguel saw it too. He reached down, picked it up carefully, and held it out. Elias looked at it for a long moment. Then he took it, not to put it back in his pocket, but to hold it in his open palm, where he could see it.
Her name was Clara,
He said. He didn't know why he said it. The boy didn't understand the words. But Miguel looked at the ring and then looked at Elias's face and nodded. Slowly, seriously, the way children nod when they understand something that can't be explained. Rosario's arm was broken at the wrist. Elias set it with 2 straight sticks and strips torn from a flour sack, working by lantern light in the barn, while Miguel slept against a horse blanket in the corner. She didn't make a sound while he worked. When he finished, she looked at the splint and then at him.
They'll come back.
She said,
I know.
Pruitt won't stop them.
I know that too.
She was quiet for a moment. Outside, the house had burned down to its frame, and the cold was coming back in to fill the space the fire had left.
What are you going to do?
Elias looked at the badge he'd pinned to his coat before riding out that night. He hadn't decided to do it, exactly. His hands had simply done it while his mind was elsewhere. He hadn't worn it in 3 years. It felt heavier than he remembered.
What I should have done 4 days ago,
He said. He rode to Briggs's ranch at first light. Harlan Briggs was a large man who had learned to use his size the way he used everything, as a form of argument. He met Elias on the porch with 2 men behind him and the expression of someone who had already decided how this conversation would end.
Cole, I thought my message was clear.
He said.
It was. I want to be equally clear.
Elias said. He stayed on his horse. He reached into his coat and produced a folded document. Not the deed to Rosario's land, but something else. A letter written in a careful hand, addressed to the Territorial Land Office in Denver. He'd spent the better part of the night writing it, and it contained, in precise and documented detail, the names of 3 county officials who had accepted payments from Briggs's operation, the dates of 2 land transfers that had been recorded with forged signatures, and the specific location of a 3rd parcel, not Rosario's, where Briggs's men had removed boundary markers and redriven them 40 yards in his favor. Elias had been a sheriff for 11 years before he'd stopped. He knew how to build a case. He'd just stopped believing it mattered.
That letter goes to Denver tomorrow morning. Unless you'd like to discuss an alternative.
Briggs's face went through several things in quick succession.
You have no authority.
I have a badge. And I have a witness who watched your men set that fire last night. And I have a woman with a broken wrist who can describe the man who broke it. You're a careful man, Briggs. You use lawyers and paperwork and distance. That's smart. But careful men make careful mistakes. And you've made enough of them that a territorial judge would find the reading interesting.
The 2 men behind Briggs shifted. Briggs held up one hand without looking at them. The silence stretched out long enough to become its own kind of answer.
The Vega land. You leave it alone. You leave her alone. You leave the boy alone. I'll be checking.
Elias said. He turned his horse.
Cole, you'd throw away what's left of your life over a Mexican widow's 40 acres?
Briggs's voice had changed, not softer, but different. The voice of a man recalculating. Elias didn't turn around.
I'm not throwing anything away. I'm just finally spending it on something worth the cost.
He rode back toward town without looking back, and he didn't let himself listen for the sound of a rifle being raised, though part of him was listening the whole way. Pruitt was in his office when Elias arrived, feet on the desk, coffee in hand, wearing the expression of a man who had arranged his life to require as little of him as possible. He looked at Elias's badge and then at Elias's face, and seemed to understand, with the instinct of a man who had spent years avoiding confrontation, that this was not a morning for avoidance. Elias laid the copy of the letter on Pruitt's desk. He'd written 2 and told him what it contained. He told him about the forged signatures and the moved boundary markers and the names of the county officials. He told him that 1 copy was going to Denver and 1 was staying in Caldwell's Creek, and that if anything happened to Rosario Vega or her son or her land, the 2nd copy would find its way to every newspaper between here and the territorial capital. Pruitt read the letter. His coffee went cold.
This'll make enemies.
Pruitt said finally.
You already have them. You just haven't been paying attention.
Elias said. He left Pruitt with the letter and walked out into the cold morning air of Caldwell's Creek, and the town looked the same as it always had. The same storefronts, the same frozen mud in the street, the same thin smoke from the same chimneys. But something in the quality of the light felt different. Or maybe it was just that he was looking at it differently, the way you look at a place when you've finally decided what you owe it. His jaw still ached where Briggs's man had hit him. His ribs, where he'd taken a boot 2 nights ago, sent a sharp reminder with every breath. He was 51 years old and tired, in ways that sleep didn't fix, and he had no illusions about what the next weeks would bring. Briggs would not fold easily. Pruitt would do the minimum, and the town would watch from behind its curtains and call it none of their business. But Rosario's land would hold. He was certain of that much. He went back to her that afternoon. She was in the barn with Miguel, assessing what could be salvaged from the ruin of the house. She'd already made a list. He could see it in her posture, the way she moved through the space with her good arm, touching things, calculating. She wasn't a woman who stayed in the wreckage. She was a woman who looked at the wreckage and started counting what was left. Elias told her what he'd done. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then,
Will it hold?
Long enough. Briggs is careful. He won't move on something that's documented.
he said. She nodded. She didn't thank him, not because she wasn't grateful, but because gratitude between people who have been through something together takes a different shape than words. She went back to her list. Miguel appeared from behind a hay bale and stood in front of Elias with the wooden horse held out in both hands. Elias looked at it.
That was your father's.
He said. Miguel kept holding it out.
I can't take that.
The boy didn't move. His expression was patient and absolute, the way children are when they've made up their minds about something and are simply waiting for the adult to catch up. Elias crouched down. He took the horse carefully, turned it in his hands. It was well made, carved with attention, the kind of thing a man makes when he has time and love and a child he wants to give something lasting to. The wood was smooth from handling. He looked at Miguel. The boy nodded once, satisfied, and went back to whatever he'd been doing behind the hay bale. Elias stood. He reached into his pocket, the pocket where the ring had lived for 3 years, and felt the shape of it. He held it for a moment. Then he took it out and looked at it in the pale winter light. And he thought about Clara, and about Ruth, and about the particular cruelty of a grief that never fully closes. He put the ring back, not to hide it, just to keep it. There was a difference, he was beginning to understand, between carrying something and being buried by it. He put the wooden horse in the other pocket. He left the next morning before the town was awake. He'd thought about staying, had turned the idea over in the night the way you turn a stone, looking for what's underneath. But Caldwell's Creek was Pruitt's town and Briggs's town, and the town of everyone who had watched a woman be humiliated on the main street and found something interesting to look at in the other direction. Elias had done what he could do. Staying would only give Briggs a fixed target. He packed light. He always had. He was tying the saddlebag when he heard the running footsteps. Small, fast. The particular rhythm of a child who has decided that speed is more important than caution. Miguel came around the corner of the barn at a dead run and stopped in front of the horse, breathing hard, his coat half-buttoned against the cold. He held out his hand. In his palm was the wooden horse. Elias looked at it.
Miguel.
The boy shook his head, pushed his hand forward. His expression was the same as it had been in the barn, patient, certain, waiting for the adult to understand what was already decided. Elias took the horse. He held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it. Lighter than the ring, lighter than the badge, lighter than most things he'd carried. And then he put it in his pocket. He mounted. He looked down at Miguel, who was looking up at him with those old, clear eyes.
You take care of her.
Elias said. Miguel didn't understand the words, but he straightened, just slightly, just enough. And Elias thought that maybe the meaning had gotten through anyway. He rode out of the yard and onto the trail that led north, away from Caldwell's Creek, into the white and open country. The cold was sharp and clean, the kind of cold that clarifies rather than punishes. And the sky above the ridge was the pale gold of a winter morning that intends to be beautiful despite everything. He didn't look back, but his hand rested on his coat pocket, not the pocket with the ring, the other one. And he rode with that hand there for a long time, feeling the small carved shape of a horse against his palm. And something in his chest that had been very quiet for 3 years began, slowly and without ceremony, to make a sound like breathing.